our first to the curtain raiser plenary. Let me invite the moderator, Ambassador Sujan Chinoy, and the speakers, Priyanka Bhide, Karuna Gopal, Nitin Pai, and Gurudas Nulkar on the stage, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to be the moderator for this curtain raiser plenary this evening. I was told that the moderator is to be seen but not heard, but I am extremely tempted to say a few words, though I should be very brief because Secretary Tanmay Lal has already laid out the canvas for you, a very broad canvas. But the theme for our panel today is navigating the crossroads of a fragmented world. It's cliched enough to say that, but for me, the fundamental question today is that a polarized world is making it extremely difficult to arrive at any kind of consensus on the larger challenges confronting the international community, and particularly with regard to economic recovery and distress in various parts of the world, healthcare, as well as climate action. The fork in the road today, so to speak, is also rendered more challenging because it's accompanied by some speaking in forked tongues. Makes it very difficult for the global south to reach any kind of certitude in what lies ahead for them. So the binary choices today, essentially flow for the rest of us because of major power contestation between the United States and China. And I dare say that with the US practicing under President Trump a new kind of internationalism, we are going to actually see, more complications, and it may also create new gaping holes for the Chinese to step in and do more. So this is particularly true because the United States has announced its withdrawal from a number of international compacts for climate change or for healthcare, such as the WHO or the UN Human Rights Council, and so on and so forth. Trump's return to power, I think, is the epitome of the uncertainty that we see today. For good or for worse, it's something that is going to leave its mark very soon. If there's an early end to the Ukraine war, I definitely feel that it's going to leave A, Ukraine disappointed, B, its European backers also deeply disappointed. But more than that, I think the European countries may have to deal with two challenges simultaneously. One is the possibility of US tariffs and the certainty of having to pay for Ukraine's reconstruction without the US stepping up equally to the plate. Now, the tech competition today has been highlighted by DeepSeek, and the first salvos in the trade war have already been fired. I know there are many among you who are trade experts, and you may have more to say. And India will not be inured to the shocks that may be around the corner, but the absolute impact may be commensurate with the kind of role you play in international trade also. In West Asia, I think the calculus has been completely upended because if President Trump is seeking to acquire Gaza or to have the Palestinians move out, despite the resistance from the Arab states, there is very little chance for any kind of a new modus vivendi or settlement developing there. You will require to have some kind of a deal for the likes of Saudi Arabia and important Arab countries to go along with this kind of rapprochement between Israel and the Arab world. We have also seen that the Sunni resurgence in Syria has brought to fore new power centers, essentially normalizing non-state actors, radical groups, and fundamentalist personalities. These ideological groups have been driven to a certain kind of ascendancy. So that has broader implications also for similar groups operating in other parts of the world. At the same time, Iran's agency, though reduced, should not be underestimated. It's a very big regional player. And I think the very notions of sovereignty, territorial integrity, are also being challenged today when we look at the discourse that is playing out from the United States with regard to, for example, the Panama Canal or, for example, Greenland. And it's going to get more interesting. Now, for me, I think while we keep saying that middle powers have great agency and a role to play today, it's a spectrum. And it's very hard to define. But for that matter, even the global south is extremely hard to define. In fact, it has no structure, it has no membership, it's a fluid concept. And the bigger challenge is that countries with a per capita GDP of US dollars 12,500 are also passing themselves off as members, if not leaders, of the global south. So I think India definitely has much more credibility when it says that it is a voice for the global south. Regional groupings like BRICS and SCO are going to be limited intrinsically because of the presence of countries like China and Russia in those groupings, and their ability to shape the emerging global order will be greatly reduced, especially if they take on an anti-West profile. And I think de-dollarization is a chimera. It's far-fetched, and nobody really has the stomach for it today. So the questions I pose to our eminent panel are, where does all this leave India? That's the big question for us from the point of view of this very eminent gathering of think tankers from around India. How will the US-China rivalry impact on the global order, the alliances and priorities such as climate action, above all, achievement of UN SDGs? What do you make of the contours of a so-called new global compact? I personally think it's very far off. But is it going to really happen in the United Nations, within the framework of the UN? And I think most of us would agree that the UN's dysfunctionality actually underscores the fact that it cannot play a role in arriving at any kind of new compact, certainly not without reforms, fundamental reforms, including Security Council reforms. So, what can the countries of the Global South do in this kind of era of flux and uncertainty? And how does the Global South play a role when it doesn't have a structure, it doesn't have regular funding, it has no secretariat, its membership is fluid? Can we speak with one voice when loyalties are also divided? And, there is multi-alignment on virtually every score. This geopolitical, economic, and military churn will have to be addressed by these four panelists, but they must, in my view, relate it to, the Indian perspective and what exactly does India want to do? Does it want to promote its digital public infrastructure? Does it want to promote its own vision of green transition and climate action, continued use of fossil fuels and biomass? The number of questions. So I'll begin with Ms. Priyanka Bhide, co-founder and director, Kuber9 Initiative, Mumbai. And I think it might be instructive if you were to speak to the role of the Global South in climate action, perhaps bring in the gender aspects as well. You have 5 to 6 minutes. I shall be rather cruel when 5 minutes are up and remind you. I myself seem to have taken more time than I had intended. But I assure you that after this, I will only be seen and not heard. Over to you.
Thank you very much. That was a very excellent framing. Thank you also, ORF, for inviting me here and giving me the opportunity to interact with so many think tanks. So I'm going to jump off from what you said in terms of the binary, right? The US-China competition that exists. We are now in Trump 2.0, but the tension that we are anticipating, we've now anticipated before. But that doesn't make it any less difficult. We still don't know what will happen tomorrow. And every 5 minutes, I scan the news to see what Donald Trump might have announced now, right? But we saw from his first term that with all the uncertainty that was there, new alliances were forming to protect trade, to protect supply chains, and for countries to essentially protect themselves. Now, in Trump 2.0, what we have seen and which will impact the global south the most is the cut in aid funding. Now, that does many things. For some countries, we've already seen some coverage from sub-Saharan Africa where that kind of aid funding is really impacting a lot of critical essentials in those countries. But what also happens then, it impacts the alliances that have been formed through aid diplomacy that was carefully crafted by the United States. Now, that is what leaves a gaping sinkhole, is what I'm going to call it, because it's a huge sinkhole. And right now, with the kind of tension in Europe, only China has the geopolitical will, the manpower, the technology, and the resources to step into some of these spaces. So what can the global south do and what can India do? I'm going to focus on India, right? I feel we should not stick to these binaries. This is something that we've done before, right? We've kind of, as a country, we've followed our own path to looking at the challenges that we have, and we've developed, whether you say the disaster response plans, the kind of technology also that has been developed by India. For example, while US and China was fighting over TikTok, we were silently developing India Stack, and we created the Aadhaar. We gave our over 1.4 billion population identity cards, some of which some citizens got identity cards for the first time in their lives. We were able to bridge gaps. We were able to make cash transfers a lot more efficient. So we were able to, as a country, put the needs of our sizable population far above any other glory. And I think over the past 15 years, I'm saying 15 years because 15 years ago, I was studying public policy and international relations in NYU, and nobody really cared about India. Everybody wanted to know what China was thinking, right? But now we're in a place where everybody recognizes India. We are in policy circles where they want to hear what we're doing. There are desks within Europe that are studying us to understand us better. So now is a chance to bring some nuance to what we can offer to build these alliances based on our strengths. And some of these strengths are being able to make affordable technology scalable, to be able to cater to the needs of a population that a lot of other countries are not able to do. So that's something that I would like to put forward, and as all of us in various spaces of thinking across the country, as we engage internationally as well, this is something that's important. This is something that we at Kuber9 have also learned through our experience in engaging on gender mainstreaming at the international stage. Very often it's not understood the path and journey that India has taken. And so in global forums, we spend a lot of time breaking that down and to say that we have come a long way. This is what we have done. And this is what we can do and do better. And then focus our alliances on those strengths. And then in that way, we can fill in some of these gaps in aid that will come up, and even otherwise, who knows, some things we just cannot predict. And in this way, we can perhaps make a third path and not be caught up in the race and in the binaries. And I will here close my brief comments.
Thank you very much. And I think the essential point that you have very successfully made is that India will point to a values-based future for humankind and not necessarily get caught up in the binary struggle between, for instance, the United States of America and China. But it doesn't answer all the questions, because while we've done very well on the domestic front, you have also referred to building alliances with multiple partners. And I think next week, the Prime Minister will be in Paris co-chairing with the French President, the AI Action Summit. And so it's not just a digital public infrastructure that we will be trying to share with the rest of the world, particularly Global South, but also things like AI, where we I believe should stand for an open and accessible AI architecture for the rest of us. Otherwise, we could also move very quickly towards a new kind of digital or AI colonization. I turn to our next panelist, that's Ms. Karuna Gopal, Distinguished Fellow, India Foundation. When you came in, you were beaming, and I asked you why you were beaming, and you said you are a very optimistic person, and like me, and also that she really believes, and rightly so, that India is today in pole position, and that we will be able to navigate these uncertainties perhaps better than many. And I would actually say that this is true because a number of foreigners have also hinted at that. There are people who believe that Prime Minister Modi has an excellent relationship for right reasons with President Trump, and that India is really well placed today to point to a better future for all. So over to you.
Thank you, Ambassador Chinoy, for moderating the session. Good evening to all of you. I will take off from where Priyanka left. She said that India is doing well, and as you also said, I certainly believe. India is today in a very happy position. We are comfortably ensconced in this capsule of comfort, let me say. I'm saying this because I have at least 5 points to highlight why I'm saying this. Today's India, my friends, is not the same India that missed the third industrial revolution. If you remember back in the 80s, India completely missed the third industrial revolution thanks to the lack of foresight of the people back then, policymakers. And when the Southeast Asia was capitalizing on technologies, and they were making phones and discs and hardware, India paradoxically became a marketplace for that. But today's India is far different from that. We have missed the third industrial revolution. We are trying to make up by Make in India, but we are capitalizing on the fourth industrial revolution that's to do with disruptive technologies like artificial intelligence, machine learning, cloud. We have done enormously well. And just to give an example, in the last 10 years, when most countries articulated their national vision for AI, I just give an example of what America and China did. China and America, basically their policies are about using artificial intelligence for their military. Germany looked at putting their AI resources in work-life balance. France looked at using AI for environment. Japan said, let's bring in efficiencies. They looked at AI. UAE said, let's create jobs. But you know what India did? India was sane, sedate, rooted, and brilliant. India said, we're going to use our artificial intelligence resources, research and development, and application in areas like agriculture, education, and healthcare. So what did we do by doing that? We built the core of our economy. We focused on the core of the economy. And then by doing that, today we are not seeking partners from elsewhere. We are attracting partners. We are attracting partners because we are in a safe place. We are doing very well. We are also deploying AI technologies for our defense. So today, India's point one is that we are not seeking partners, but we are attracting partners. The second point is, my friends, again, I'll alert you to one very important thing that happened in the early 90s. India was written off at one time, saying that India is an epic story of wasted promise, because India at that point in time couldn't capitalize on 4 quadruplets that came: globalization, urbanization, industrialization, motorization. They came as quadruplets, and India was not prepared. But again, the Southeast Asian countries capitalized, like Singapore, Japan, South Korea, Malaysia, Indonesia. They grew in double digits. India lost the game again. But today, when you look inside India, India has done phenomenally well, and it has an awe-inspiring story to tell. For instance, Priyanka mentioned the digital assets that we have created. Today, if you know the number of people that have been brought into the banking system, it's just amazing that maybe two countries like United States of America and Mexico put together, that's the number of people that have been included into our banking system. India has built homes. Look at the scale. We have built an entire Japan. We have given fuel to households. We have given it to the entire households of country. In a place like maybe Germany, we have electrified homes, all maybe as big as Russia. This is the scale that we're talking about. So again, it is so awe-inspiring that people are looking towards India. How did we develop those digital assets? Digital public infrastructure today, if Global South has to look at India, we have the solutions, we can take it forward. Third point, my friends, is the way we look at China. I don't think today's India understands perfectly well how to deal with China. We are not going to look at the romantic definition of Chindia anymore. We know how we have to deal with China when it comes to the protecting the borders, but at the same time, we know how to work with the economy of China. We are not ready to decouple with Chinese economy. We are not ready. In fact, it is not going to happen immediately because no country is actually economically decoupling with China. China has moved forward. China's policy was China first. And it has rare earths. It has many things to give to many countries. So obviously they'll come. So in fact, United States has a trade deficit with China. But today we understand how to work with China. Now, the fourth point why we are happy is India also knows how to deal with the United States of America. I would say we may not be explicit, we may not be sharing it, but I think we have what I call as the diplomatic Aikido is something we will do. What is Aikido? Aikido is a martial art. Martial art where there's no aggression. There are two people fighting. When somebody gets aggressive, the other moves, takes a step to avoid the hit. It looks like a dance. So we know exactly how to work with the United States of America. I'm 100% sure we are strongly placed. And the last point, my friends, is I don't have to say, ambassador said, this ambassador said, everybody said that. G20, we have navigated discussions from diverse countries. It's impossible to seriously draw consensus, but somehow we managed to do it. And we've emerged as, maybe the voice of the Global South. I'm not saying that India will be an alpha male leading the pack. No. But India certainly is now under the arc lights, the global arc lights, and we are giving the best ballet of our times. That's what I can say.
Thank you very much. And I think I agree with you that India's credibility is today at an all-time high. And it's interesting that you referred to AI in defense. I know there are many distinguished members of the armed forces also in the audience. And we must keep that focus on AI in defense for India, particularly given the uncertainty with which the lethal autonomous weapon systems are being developed in different parts of the world without any kind of regulatory framework in place. And on China, there are, again, others who will comment. But it's important for us to see what kind of debate we wish to have in this country with regard to China's participation through its supply chains that are perhaps linked to the productivity and future of our own MSMEs. And this is already underway. I now turn to our third speaker. That's Sri Nitin Pai, Director and co-founder of the Takshashila Institution in Bangalore. And perhaps you could analyze for us a little more the opportunities and the challenges for India amidst this evolving uncertainty, a world in flux.
Thank you. Delighted to be here, meeting old friends and hope to make some new ones. I just want to put the current moment in context, right? If you look at the cultural understanding of history of many countries to the west of India, it seems to have a sort of a linear trajectory, right? Then something starts, there's creation, and then there is destruction, and then, it ends there. But the cultural understanding of history in India, China, Japan, and the other places is more cyclical. Right? There are cycles, and there are cycles of creation and cycles of destruction, and things goes on. Even if there's destruction at one point, destruction leads to the next creation. So Indian philosophy has a very interesting concept to understand the correct moment. It's called Yuganta, right? Which is when one epoch ends and another epoch starts. The interregnum between the two parts is called a Yuganta, right? And when you look at, I'm an electrical engineer. I don't study philosophy or Sanskrit or anything. I'm just trying to make sense of the word. And what they say is that when an epoch ends, the dharma of that epoch ends. That means the rules, norms which obtained in a particular epoch end. And when another epoch starts, there are new rules, norms for that new era. But in between is this period of flux. For the last 20 years, those of us in international relations, we've been warning of flux. Flux is here, right? Flux at Yuganta means that you don't have a prescription on how to act. You don't have rules of the road, or rules of the road are constantly changing. And you've got to do the best you can and prepare yourself for the next epoch. Now, this is a moment of opportunity for India. Not because of the kind of political, economic, technological achievements that we've had in the last 10, 20 years, but because for the first time in independent India, we have a chance to reshape the rules of the road for the world, right? As long as there was a steady state, the United Nations was functioning, the old order was in motion. You had to queue up outside the United Nations with your application forms in triplicate and say, I need to belong to the permanent, I need a permanent seat in the Security Council. Now you have a situation, the United Nations itself might go up for a toss, and a new mechanism might come into the making. We are in a position to actually be at the high table. So in that sense, the turmoil, the flux that we see in politics, geopolitics, geoeconomics, and technology, every one of these is an opportunity for us to be on that high table and be a sort of founding member of new institutions, right? So it's better to be a founding member and a trustee than to apply for memberships of clubs. Right? I think some clubs you have to wait until you're 102 years old before you can get a membership. So if you create your own club, it's good. So when G20 was being talked about after the global financial crisis, some of us said that, look, forget about the UN Security Council. Let's focus on making the G20 the high table of the world, because you're in it's big enough and it's small enough and you're there. And G20, the moment came, right? So we are already in a situation where the G20 can be an effective driver of global governance. And that's just a metaphor and an example. And I think you can look at that G20 kind of a setup in every single sphere of human activity. And as long as you're willing to say that, I don't really care about the institutions which were made in the past. They were good for us as long as they worked for us, but I'm not really married to it. If the United Nations goes up for a toss tomorrow, fine, we'll do something else, right? We're not married to the United Nations. We're not married to the climate change, UN FCC on climate change. Some of the organizations here might think that they're married to, but I don't think India is married to any of these, right? So as long as we are being flexible enough to change our affiliations, but pursuing the same goal, I think we are in a good place. So what's the pattern of how this new rules of the road are going to be written? I don't think it's 1945 is a good example, nor is 1815 after the end of Napoleon. There was a concert of Vienna and they created rules of the road. I think a better metaphor is the Treaty of Westphalia, which happened after the 30 Years' War in Europe. So, Christians and Protestants and Catholics and French and Central Europeans, they fought for 30 years over doctrinal, theological, territorial issues, and finally decided that, look, we need to have peace. And this peace was the Peace of Westphalia, which meant that you don't interfere into the internal affairs of other countries. At the very minimum, that's what it means. But the history of Westphalia is not a treaty, right? Westphalia was a set of treaty arrangements, some bilateral, some plurilateral, some trilateral, some multilateral. And finally, you came up with rules of the road for the world, which stood the test of time for about 300 to 400 years. I think we're going to be in that kind of a situation. There's not going to be one defining Treaty of San Francisco which creates the United Nations. There are going to be multiple arrangements like this. The only fear and the question I have is, will we need to go through that period of 30 years of war or equivalent thereof before we wisen up to the fact that, look, we've got to create world order, right? And looking at the principal economies of the world, whether it's the United States or China, I don't get the confidence that people will be sensible enough. So there is a risk of conflict, which is why in the last 6 months, I've gone out on a limb and said we need to increase our defense expenditure from 2% of GDP to 4% of GDP. It's kind of crazy. When I met people in the finance ministry, some of my friends, they said, where's the money going to come from? Where are you going to get 4% of GDP? I said, that's your problem, right? It's not my problem. But I think we have to be able to make the case that in the next 5 years, in order to not be affected adversely in a world where there's going to be war, we need to scale up defense expenditure much higher than what it is, 2 to 4%. Now, we've got to find the money. We've got to make those tough compromises. We've got to help the policymakers to make those tough compromises. Okay. 4 or 5 years later, I think we can get back to 2%, but we need a surge in defense. A final point. What does it take for India to get there? I think other than the fact that we need defense expenditure, just 2 things. Focus on 8% growth and focus on ensuring that pluralism manifests itself as a strength and does not end up as a weakness. If we do two of these things, I think we are in a good place. I agree with a whole lot of what Karuna said, in that we are in a good situation. We just have to manage these 2 things and the rest will take care of itself.
Thank you. I think you highlighted a big problem here, because the rules-based international order, in fact, the only one that we have, generally speaking, is through the UN Charter, 1945. But it's not responding to the needs of the current era. It's not reflecting the changes in the balance of power. It's not meeting the needs of the global south. And the only decision-making body there that truly is responsible for peace, prosperity, and development, that's the UN Security Council, has failed to reform itself. And it's fractious, it's divided. So the problem here is there are some who are saying, whose rules? Who has made these rules? And they're not being able to participate in the process of decision-making or have their needs felt. But remember that, at least that's the way I feel, that the global order cannot be changed fundamentally or altered without cataclysmic changes. History has taught us that. So unless we want a 30-year war or even a shorter war that completely destroys several countries around the world, you're not going to have a new global order. We'll have to live with that. I now turn to last but not the least speaker. That's Sri Gurudas Nulkar, Senior Fellow, Pune International Center. And I wonder if you'd like to address issues related to energy security or green transitions, or perhaps even how Trump, for example, has jettisoned this whole idea of green transitions and climate action. He doesn't believe in that at all. And if he is going to revive fossil fuels, why would the global south hesitate to continue with its own judicious use of all forms of energy? And in India, we are doing a lot to create a very balanced mix that includes fossil and non-fossil, clean, even biomass. Very interesting work has been done in this regard. So would you like to speak to that, and also perhaps address the whole issue of critical minerals, which are playing a very important role today? And you have the critical minerals partnership, but that's only about 14 countries, and everything to be had on the continents in mines around the world has already been taken. So is this scrimmage going to now shift to the seabed? Is it going to get a little more interesting there in terms of thermal vents and polymetallic nodules and things like that? But I'd like you to speak to that, please. Thank you.
Or small modular reactors for that matter. Yeah, thank you. I'm very happy to be here, and thank you for the questions that you posed, Ambassador. I'd like to pick up from where Nitin left, and you talked about 8% GDP growth and the two problems that have been we need to look at more closely, including defense. I'd like to pitch in the third problem, and I completely agree and concur with the other speakers when they have their optimism of what India has done today and where we are. Only with a pinch of salt, and that pinch of salt is that the understanding that there is no Atmanirbharta in the renewable energy pathway. We have to depend on critical minerals for the other countries. Our transition path in energy, in fact, our economic growth is completely dependent upon the energy that we have, right? So it seems only fair that we have to address the challenge of the renewable energy pathway and the critical dependence first on fossil fuel and then on the critical minerals. And I'd like to draw your attention, you specifically spoke about Trump, and I'd like to draw your attention to what Trump said, perhaps I think just a day or two ago. He wants his pound of flesh in Ukraine, right? And he very unequivocally said the other day that for all the help that we've been providing you, we need access to your critical mineral resource. And Ukraine is sitting on the treasure trove of critical mineral resources of Europe. And if they get this, then everybody is going to catch a cold. The other problem that I would like to highlight is that of lithium. And we are so totally dependent upon our electric vehicle batteries, all of that on lithium. We don't have any reserves. In fact, in the list of critical minerals, about the first 8 critical minerals, we are 100% dependent. But look what has happened in South America recently, what's called as the lithium triangle of Bolivia, Chile, and Argentina. All that lithium is being mined in the salt pans, and that's causing great environmental concern. Now, we know that the ecological problems of one nation are being wooed by other nations. We are no longer in an isolated nation. Amazon's problem is no longer Amazon's problem. Sundarban's ecological degradation is no longer the problem of India, but it's also dependent upon the entire biogeographical region and the other parts of the world. So this is getting increasingly complex, where the critical minerals we are being completely dependent upon critical minerals on other countries. Relations are not stable. Luckily, we have very good relations with Scandinavian countries, European countries, with which we are dependent upon nickel and some other minerals. So the question which I would like to address here is, what could be the renewable energy pathway for India in this fragmented and a world in flux? And the way we try to answer this question is that, look at the resources which India has. We have ample sunlight. We have sunlight for 12 months. We have good quality soil. We have 380 million hectares of land. Now, with these 3 resources, we have to get back our photosynthetic capacity and create biomass for our energy transition, right? 380 million hectares of land is what we have for India. Unfortunately, ISRO's recent report says that 92 million hectares of land is in a degraded condition, which means it is functioning poorly on photosynthetic capacity. We are not sequestering enough carbon. We are not creating enough biomass. If we are able to bring back at least a part of it, which we have already given as a bond commitment, we want to get back 30 million hectares back into reclaim that land, but we have no kind of strategy towards it. If we are able to get that degraded land, and not just degraded land, there's an ample uncultivated land which is also available in India. There's significant migration which is happening in farmer communities simply because of the herbivore population which has increased. They are raiding the crops. If we are able to get back this biosynthetic capacity and convert it into the 2 viable routes, which is compressed biogas as well as green hydrogen, then we can work on some kind of Atmanirbharta for the country. It is going to create lot of jobs. We have the skills required for agriculture, we have the land required for agriculture, we have the sunlight required for agriculture. We need to create water resources, we need to create surface water, groundwater, we have to work on watershed as an economy. And these things are viable. India has worked on this for a very long time. We have the knowledge, we have the hydrogeologists who can tell us about groundwater and surface water. This becomes a viable option in a transitionary world where, global trade, prices of lithium, prices of cobalt are going to be dictated by demand and supply, and how soon you can transit into the EV. So our focus on electric vehicles and battery operated vehicles has been too strong for a very long time. And the hydrogen mission is kind of trying to overcome that. And I believe that is the part which India must address if we have to regain our position in economic growth as well as in global trade.
But before you actually end, because there are a few seconds left, your share, what's the likelihood of, say, Elon Musk wanting to put pressure on India to take in more of EVs and maybe produced in China as well, particularly if the US is closing its doors?
Yeah,
to EVs.
the likelihood is very high, but that's not my worry. My worry is more about hydrogen electrolyzers. I mean, there are countries which are pushing this technology down our throat, and we are completely dependent upon that. On the other hand, we have gasification as a viable route. There have been companies which have been practicing gasification for hydrogen, gasification of biomass into hydrogen. That is something which we need to develop very, very strongly.
So I think what he has really pointed out is very important. We need technology security also. But the high end of technology is never fungible. It's always a lesser iteration that is generally available. For the high end, I think you need to go back again to partnerships and a lot of emphasis, not autarky, but a lot of emphasis on domestic R&D and innovation. With that, we have about nearly 15 minutes for Q&A. Just make sure that none of these questions that you pose are addressed to me. That they're all addressed to the four eminent panelists. And please identify the panelist that you wish should answer the question. Keep your questions short, brief, and to the point. And if you wish to take a few seconds to identify yourself, who will have the first go? Yes, go ahead, sir.
Good evening to everybody. Myself, Dr. Habibullah Ansari from Patna. My question is that how we can reduce the over-dependency on USA and China. Both countries are very important for India. So why not we focus on the self-reliance itself,
yes.
What one speaker has focused the last speaker.
Yeah. So you want that to be addressed by the last speaker?
Yes.
Why? Wonderful. I'll take two more
reduce?
questions. Thank you, sir. We'll take two more questions. In fact, we can take three more. So hopefully each of the panelists will get one question addressed to themselves. Yes, next one, please. Yes, General, please.
Balancing reasonably well both with US as well as China. But the recent announcements by the Trump withdrawing from so many places, stopping the aids and everything, creating a vacuum. And with the deep pockets, China is the one who will certainly step into that and try to control the things. So this balancing act of India with China and Russia and this future scenario which is appearing, how do you feel that we should move ahead?
It's an onerous task and that you will remember these questions. I'm taking it easy. Next, please.
I have a question for Priyanka Bhide. Can you speak a little bit more about engaging in gender mainstreaming that you talked about, creating a third path?
And I invite one more question, and I recommend that it be addressed to Ms. Karuna Gopal, please. Yes, please. Gender equality. Commodore Vasan, I'll come back to you in the next one.
Hello, I'm Dr. Nisha from Gujarat Institute of Development Research. This is not my question actually. I'm really impressed by Dr. Karuna Gopal. She's so positive and she has kept everything in such a manner that you will feel proud of, yes, real Indian now. So I would request if within 2 days or maybe after that, if you can propose some model of this positivity and happiness where you feel India as a proud Indian, where you take all schemes are in a positive manner.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So we have 11 minutes, 18 seconds. I want to do a second round. So it's going to be telegraphic, 1 minute answers from each of you. Over to you. We begin from the left.
Yeah, so
flank.
the question which you asked is how do you reduce the dependence about US and China? I mean, that's a question which is a no-brainer. We have to depend upon them, right? I mean, there's just no way that we can, like she said, decouple trade from there. The only thing is we need to look at which technologies we need to decouple ourselves from. And one of that, like I said, is the electric vehicle, the electrolyzer, hydrogen electrolyzer technology. From China, we are importing a lot of synthetic graphite, and that's causing huge environmental damage. It's extremely emission intensive. Now, we need to find alternatives for that. You know, we have a long history of substituting minerals when they start getting stocked out. So the human ingenuity is, of course, never compromised, and it always stands successful. So a couple of focused questions we need to ask ourselves about what we need to move away from in our dependence with United States and China. And according to me, since my work is in that, it's about energy dependence.
Mr. Pai, I just quickly run down the
I'll take the one about US and China. I think for the longest time, for about 20 years, India has been in a position to be a swing state between the United States and China. So our ideal situation is not to be on any one side, but to swing and on the side of the player. You know, let's on climate, we want to be on the same side of China. On technology, we want to be on the same side as the United States. That's the ideal situation, where we have to have better relations with each of them than they have with each other. So as long as our relations with them is better than their relation with each other, we are in a better situation. Challenge number one came to this from Xi Jinping, because Xi Jinping comes around and starts taking territory. You know, once it becomes a militarized thing, then it's not easy to swing. You can't swing with a player whom you have a military confrontation with. So now that the military confrontation is sort of subsided a bit, I think their opportunity for us to be again on a swing path is higher. We must remember one thing though, and I agree with Gurudas on this. In terms of technology, whether it's climate or with semiconductors, our interests lie with the United States. Regardless of Trump and whatever he's doing, there is no case in history where any country has built a semiconductor industry being on the wrong side of the United States, including China. China could build it only because they were inside, you know, the penumbra of US. Right? So we have to do that. So that's how realpolitik works. You have to work with both of them.
Ms. Karuna Gopal.
Yeah. You know, I think most of that has been answered, but typically when you look at India and China, I think China today definitely enjoys, there's a deficit of trust. If you look at the Belt and Road Initiative, I mean, the entire world knows what China is up to. So today they have kind of misguided the world, saying that we are going to give grants, but it turned out to be loans. So Sri Lanka's slipping, and then we bailed out Sri Lanka, and Tibet and Nepal, I think they're also going through the same thing. And China always plays difficult. If you know that one-line nation theory, where to keep Russia at bay, how China acted. I mean, they said USA, Japan, European Union, and China will be, you know, together. So the point is, China will always be looked at with caution, and our trade relations, we can certainly work on them, for the simple reason that when you want to get self-sufficient in energy, not necessarily do we need to go the electric way. For instance, today, if we want to conserve energy in this building, there are two ways of doing it. One is deploy smart technologies. The other is create what we call as passive technologies, just have a good northern lights open and all. There is always an avenue for that. So you don't have to seriously look at technology is the only solution. For instance, there's a choice between driverless cars and driveless cars. I mean, you can do that. So to a large extent, we can reduce our dependence on
And good public transport
yes,
too.
public transport. So we have, I mean, at a national level now, we are seriously looking at customizing motorized, non-motorized transportation, the modal mix of transportation. There are a whole bunch of things we can do. So India will understand how to deal with China, and USA. We, as we said, we have had legacy um, assets created in terms of goodwill, and over the years, how, over the decades, what kind of relationship we built with United States of America. On top of that, today we have the decision makers right at the top, intangible assets that are influencing that, the leadership decision is Indians after all. So I think we are in a good place. That's what it looks like.
Would you like to add to that happy note?
Yes, I would actually first like to add to that happy note, because even in terms of AI, and I'm not an AI expert at all, in the aftermath of DeepSeek, we saw how our minister Shri Ashwini Vaishnav held a public interaction where he again stressed the focus of India's AI mission to be to solve for these issues that we face, right? So whether it's agriculture, weather, so these kind of
And defense.
and defense, exactly. So which is why again I feel that there's a scope for us to play to our strengths and perhaps create something that's very different. I mean, I remember this very famous interview where Sam Altman was asked if 3 engineers sitting in India could build something like ChatGPT, and he had said no, absolutely not. We wouldn't. I mean, in other words, but China has done that. And should we get into the race, or should we just play the race differently? Is something that I think we should think about through these 2 days. And to answer your question on gender mainstreaming and the experience that we had, so we were looking at the kind of perspective that we could bring to in the global conversation on feminist foreign policy. And in our research, we realized that actually India had done a lot in terms of creating inclusive foreign policy, and also in terms of bringing the number, if you see even the gender balance and inclusivity within that space. But when we started speaking about that work in global forums, we realized that there was a bias, because traditionally in gender, when you look at the gender markers, India does so poorly that there was not an understanding of where we come from. And so what we were trying to do is to create the space in that global dialogue to say that you have to look at context-specific growth, right? And so when you look at India, you cannot just compare us to a China or a USA. You have to look at the path and journey that each country has taken. And then that applies to other countries in the global south as well.
Thank you. It's 3 minutes, 55 seconds left. I'm going to do a hard stop. So I would invite 2 quick questions from the floor, and then very rapidly go through the panel again.
Sir.
Yes, Commodore Vasan, I denied you the opportunity earlier. You can have the floor.
Yeah, my name is Vasan. I look after the Chennai Center for China Studies. A quick question to Mr. Gurudas. I think while the ideas are excellent, is there a policy alignment at the top level in terms of, your initiatives? Because, we seem to be saying you will continue to get EV, etc. That's one for you. Other thing is on, while we share the optimism of expressed by you, which
One question, sir.
Only one question? Okay.
Yes, please, if you don't mind. But that doesn't mean you won't take me. I look like an old sea dog. I must be on your ship next time you sail. One more, that side.
Yes,
please.
sir. Vishesh from the GeoStarter. My question is to Mr. Pai. You had talked about...
Louder, please.
Am I audible now? My question is to Mr. Pai. You had just talked about the thing Yugantar. Now we are seeing a tariff deal oil deal between Sri Lanka and China. We have also seen the activities in St. Martin Island, and also the changing perspectives during the Mauritius and Malaysian deal. So what would you think that besides warfare, besides hand-to-hand combat, what are the strategies and theories that India can apply?
Thank you. Thank you. So
Thank you.
we will actually give each of the panelists a chance to respond to all that's been said, but it'll have to be done in about 30 to 40 seconds, maybe 45 seconds.
So the answer to your question is no, there's been nothing in the policy, but we have been able to break grounds there. And the MNRE as well as the MOPNG has been interested. And we are putting up the first cluster of about 1,000 acres of biomass cultivation for green hydrogen production in India very soon.
To your question, I think the answer is for India to be more India. If India shows itself to be a pluralist, democratic country, which is growing at a very fast pace and achieving great things, despite all the challenges it has in a domestic space, that sets an example, and all these other countries in the things will fall in line, because the power of example is so strong. That's also been India's historic strength. I just want to make one note. I wanted to say this in the beginning. I think there is no such thing as a global south, and even if there's a global south, they are not a part of it. So I think then a lot of things become very clear.
I tried to mention the same point earlier, but I'm glad that you underscored that. I don't agree that we cannot be a part of it. I think China will have a harder time being part of the global south. We actually have a much more credible place in the global south. I turn to Ms. Karuna.
So actually, after listening to everything, I think, the one stanza in Purusha Sukta has come to my mind. Like we have this Sahasra Sitsha Purushaha, Sahasrakshas, Sahasrapat. I think India is today kind of looking at thinking using 1,000 heads, Sahasra Sitsha. Sahasraksha. We are like vigilant and watching, with our 1,000 eyes, and we are trying to take decisions and walk with our 1,000 feet on our hands. So this is perhaps what India is doing to understand the new world order, or to navigate the new world order. It has to apply itself 100% and kind of capitalize on the potential that it has and draw from our ancient, this is Yuganta. We have to stick to what is called as the Yuga Dharma, go according to the Dharma of the Yuga.
Thank you. You can have the remaining 17 seconds.
I'll take 5 so that you have some left over as well. I just want to say that while I've been very positive in my intervention, there is a lot of chaos that we're dealing with. So I think it's important that we all work together in the think tank space, which is still quite young and evolving in India, and how we shape it would also, I hope at some point, influence the trajectory that our country takes.
Please join me in giving them a big hand. Thank you very much.